He had promised himself it would be quick. A signature, a set of keys handed over, maybe one last walk through empty rooms to make sure nothing was left behind. That was all. He would not linger. He would not allow the house to speak to him the way it once had, filling the silence with memories he had spent years trying to forget. But as he stood in front of the gate, the painted wood peeling in familiar patterns, the jasmine climbing the fence exactly where it had always climbed, he felt the first crack in his resolve. Some places hold you differently than others. Some places remember you even when you wish they would not. The real estate agent had called it a formality. The house had been closed for 3 years, sitting empty after his mother's death, slowly accumulating dust and disrepair, while he tried to decide what to do with it. Selling had seemed like the only practical choice. He lived 500 miles away now, had built a life that did not include weekend trips to a small town where everyone still remembered him as the boy who left. But practicality, he was learning, had nothing to do with standing here, his hand on the gate latch, unable to move forward. The house looked smaller than he remembered, or perhaps he had simply grown larger, older, more distant from the person who once called this place home. The windows were dark. The porch sagged slightly on the left side. The garden his mother had tended so carefully had gone wild, roses sprawling over the path, lavender spilling from the beds she had edged so precisely. It looked abandoned. It looked like a place where life had stopped and never quite resumed. And yet, as he finally pushed the gate open and heard it creak in that particular way it had always creaked, something tightened in his chest. Not nostalgia, exactly. Something heavier than that. Something closer to regret. He walked slowly up the path, his footsteps loud in the quiet afternoon. The town had always been quiet, the kind of place where you could hear your own thoughts too clearly, where silence felt like a presence rather than an absence. He had hated that once, found it suffocating. Now, older and worn down by the noise of the city, he understood why some people chose it, why some people never left. The key was in his pocket, cool and solid against his palm when he reached for it. For a moment he thought about turning back, getting in his car, telling the agent to handle everything remotely. He did not need to go inside. He did not need to see the kitchen where his mother had made coffee every morning, or the living room where she had sat knitting in the evenings, or the bedroom upstairs where the window overlooked the field and the old oak tree and the road that led out of town. He did not need any of it. But his hand was already turning the key. The door was already opening, and he was already stepping inside. The smell hit him first. Not unpleasant, just old, closed air, wood and dust and something faintly floral that might have been his mother's soap, or the dried flowers she used to keep in bowls on the windowsills. The light coming through the windows was soft, filtered through curtains that had once been white, but had faded to a pale cream. Everything was exactly where she had left it. The furniture, the rugs, the photographs on the mantel. His first instinct was to open windows, to let air and light flood in and dispel this feeling of suspended time. But he did not. He stood in the entryway, his bag still hanging from his shoulder, and let the house settle around him. Let it remember him. Let himself remember it. He had been 23 the last time he lived here, fresh out of university, angry at the smallness of his life, convinced that staying would mean suffocating. His mother had not argued when he said he was leaving. She had simply nodded, folded his shirts into a box, and told him the door would always be open if he changed his mind. He had not changed his mind. He had visited, of course. Holidays, a weekend here and there when work allowed. But those visits had felt like obligations, brief intrusions into a life he was building elsewhere. He had not let himself sink back into the rhythms of this place, had not let himself remember what it felt like to wake to birdsong instead of traffic, to see stars at night, to know everyone you passed on the street. And he had not let himself think about her, about the girl who had been part of every memory tied to this house, the girl who had sat on the porch steps with him on summer evenings, who had walked with him to the oak tree in the field, who had kissed him for the first time in the kitchen while his mother was out buying groceries. The girl he had left without saying goodbye. Her name had been Clara, was still Clara, he supposed, though he had not spoken it aloud in years. He had heard through his mother that she had stayed in town, that she had married, that she was a teacher now at the primary school, that she was happy. His mother had mentioned these things casually, in passing, as though they were simple facts, rather than small cuts that reopened something he thought had healed. He had nodded each time, said something non-committal, and changed the subject. And now his mother was gone, and Clara was somewhere in this town, and he was standing in a house that remembered both of them more clearly than he wanted it to. He moved through the rooms slowly, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The kitchen still had the blue curtains his mother had sewn herself. The living room still had the armchair by the fireplace where she had spent her evenings. Upstairs, his old bedroom was untouched. The bed was made. The books on the shelf were the ones he had left behind when he moved. A box in the corner held things from his childhood, drawings, report cards, a soccer trophy. He did not open it. He walked to the window instead and looked out at the field. The grass was tall now, golden in the late afternoon light. The oak tree stood where it had always stood, massive and still, its branches heavy with leaves. And beyond the tree, past the edge of the field, he could see the roof of another house. The house where Clara had grown up. The house where, if his mother's letters were accurate, she still lived. He turned away from the window, walked back downstairs, made himself focus on the task at hand. The agent was coming tomorrow to do a final walkthrough before the listing went live. He needed to go through his mother's things, decide what to keep and what to donate. He needed to check the plumbing, the wiring, the roof. He needed to be practical, efficient, detached. But as the afternoon stretched into evening, and the light shifted from gold to amber to the deep blue of dusk, he found himself moving slower, lingering, opening drawers, not because he needed to, but because they were there, touching objects that had no value except that his mother had touched them. A wooden spoon worn smooth from use, a pair of reading glasses on the side table, a sweater folded over the back of a chair. Small things, ordinary things, things that should not have hurt but did. He did not turn on the lights as darkness fell. He sat in the armchair by the fireplace and let the shadows deepen around him. The house was silent, the kind of silence that felt like it was waiting for something. And maybe it was. Maybe that was why he could not bring himself to leave. Maybe the house knew, in whatever way houses know things, that he was not ready, that there were things he had left unfinished, things he had run from, things that would not stay buried no matter how many years he put between himself and this place. A knock at the door startled him. He had not expected anyone, had not told anyone he was here except the agent, and she was not due until tomorrow. For a moment he considered not answering, sitting still in the darkness until whoever it was gave up and went away. But the knock came again, softer this time, almost hesitant, and he found himself standing, walking to the door, opening it. She stood on the porch, her hands folded in front of her, her face tilted up toward him in the dim light spilling from inside. Clara, older now, lines at the corners of her eyes that had not been there before, her hair longer and darker than he remembered, but unmistakably her, the same quiet presence, the same way of looking at him that made him feel both seen and exposed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. He could not find words, could not reconcile the person standing in front of him with the girl he had carried in his memory for so long. And then she said very quietly, "I saw the light. I thought maybe you'd need help with the house." He wanted to say no, wanted to tell her he had it under control, that he did not need anything, that she should go, but what came out instead was, "How did you know I was here?" She smiled faintly. "This is a small town. Someone saw your car. Word travels." She paused, glanced past him into the darkened house. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside. She moved past him, her shoulder brushing his briefly, and he caught the scent of something clean and familiar. Soap, lavender, the same things she had always smelled like. He closed the door and followed her into the living room, where she stood looking around at the furniture, the photographs, the carefully preserved stillness of his mother's life. "It hasn't changed," she said softly. "I thought it might have, but it's exactly the same." "You've been here?" he asked, and she nodded. "Your mother invited me for tea sometimes, after you left." She turned to look at him. "She missed you." He did not know what to say to that. The guilt was immediate and sharp. He had known his mother was lonely, had known and done nothing except call once a week and visit twice a year, had told himself it was enough even when he knew it was not. Clara seemed to understand his silence. She moved to the window, looked out at the field and said, I missed you too. The words hung in the air between them. Simple, direct, devastating. He had expected anger, maybe, resentment for the way he had left, but not this, not the quiet acknowledgement of something he had tried very hard not to think about. Clara, he started, but she shook her head. You don't have to say anything. I didn't come here for an apology or an explanation. I came because... She trailed off, turned back to face him. Because I thought you might need someone and because I wanted to see you. He felt something crack inside him, some wall he had built carefully over the years. I heard you got married, he said, and it came out rougher than he intended. I did. Her voice was steady. It didn't last. He wanted things I couldn't give him. Mostly, he wanted me to forget about you. She said it without accusation, just fact. I tried, I really did. But some people stay with you even when they're gone. He sat down heavily on the couch, suddenly exhausted. I shouldn't have come back. Maybe not, she agreed. But you're here now. She sat down beside him, not touching but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. What are you going to do with the house? Sell it, that's why I'm here, to empty it out and sell it. She nodded slowly. That's practical. Yes. Is that what you want? He looked at her, at the way the dim light caught in her hair, at the familiar curve of her mouth, at the quiet strength in her eyes that had always made him feel like he could be honest with her in ways he could not be with anyone else. I don't know what I want, he admitted. I thought I did. I thought I had it all figured out. But being here... It's like everything I built away from this place doesn't matter. Like it was all just noise to drown out the things I didn't want to feel. What things? He took a breath, let it out slowly. That I made a mistake, that I left too soon, that I spent so many years running I forgot what I was running from. He paused. That I hurt you, that I've been hurting ever since. Her hand found his in the darkness. Warm, solid, real. We were young, she said quietly. You did what you thought you had to do. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it human. She squeezed his hand gently. You're allowed to have been scared. You're allowed to have wanted more than this town could give you. You're just not allowed to pretend it didn't cost you anything. He looked down at their joined hands, at the way her fingers fit against his like they had never stopped fitting. What did it cost you? She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but unflinching. Years. A marriage I entered for the wrong reasons. The belief that I could love someone else the way I loved you. She turned to face him fully. But also clarity. I know now what I want, what I don't want, who I am when I'm not waiting for someone to come back. Are you happy? Most days, are you? He wanted to lie, to say yes, to protect both of them from the truth. But this was Clara, and she had always deserved more than his lies. No, he said, I don't think I've been happy in a very long time. She did not offer comfort, did not tell him it would be okay, or that time healed all wounds. She simply sat with him in the truth of it, and somehow that was more than enough. They stayed like that, hands clasped, the house settling around them in the darkness, until she finally said, I should go, it's late. He did not want her to leave, wanted to ask her to stay, to sit with him through the night, to help him make sense of everything he was feeling. But he had no right to ask. Had given up that right years ago when he drove away without looking back. So he walked her to the door, stood on the porch as she descended the steps, watched as she turned at the gate to look back at him. I'm glad you're here, she said. Even if it's just to sell the house, I'm glad I got to see you. Clara, he said, and she waited. But he did not know how to finish the sentence, did not know how to put into words everything that was rising up in him. So he just said, Thank you, she smiled, a real smile, warm and a little sad. Good night, she said, and then she was gone, walking down the road toward her house, her figure fading into the darkness until she was just a shadow, and then nothing at all. He stood on the porch long after she disappeared. The night was cool, the stars were bright, the field stretched out before him, silver in the moonlight. And for the first time since he arrived, he felt something shift. Not resolution exactly, not peace, but a kind of opening, a space where something new might grow if he let it. The next morning, he woke early, made coffee in his mother's kitchen, using her old percolator because the modern machine he had brought from the city seemed too loud, too intrusive. He drank it black, standing at the window, looking out at the field and the oak tree and the road beyond. The agent would be here in a few hours. He needed to make decisions, needed to sort through his mother's belongings, decide what to keep and what to let go. But first, he needed to walk. He crossed the field slowly, the grass wet with dew, soaking through his shoes. The oak tree was enormous up close, its trunk thick and gnarled, its roots breaking through the earth in great twisted coils. He and Clara had carved their initials here once. He searched for them now, running his hand over the bark, and found them near the base. Faded but still visible. 2 letters linked by a plus sign, enclosed in a heart. Childish, earnest, permanent. He traced the lines with his finger, felt the roughness of the wood, the way time had tried to erase them but could not quite manage. And then he heard footsteps behind him. She was there again. Clara. Dressed for work this time, her bag over her shoulder, her hair pulled back. "I take this route to school," she explained, nodding toward the path that cut through the field. "I saw you from the road. Do you walk past here every day?" "Every day." She stepped closer, looked at the tree, at the initials. "I always look for these, just to make sure they're still here." "Why?" She met his eyes. "Because they remind me that some things are real, that I didn't imagine it." He wanted to tell her that he had never forgotten, that even when he tried, even when he filled his days with work and his nights with distractions, she was always there, a constant presence at the edges of his consciousness. But the words felt too big, too unwieldy. So instead he said, "I used to think about this tree, when I was away. I used to wonder if it was still standing." "It's still standing," she said quietly. "Some things are stronger than we give them credit for." They stood together in the shade of the branches, the morning light filtering through the leaves in shifting patterns. He could hear birds, the distant sound of a car on the road, the quiet rhythm of her breathing beside him. And he thought, not for the first time since arriving, that maybe leaving had been the easy choice, that staying, facing the life he could have had, would have required a kind of courage he had not possessed at 23. But he was not 23 anymore, and courage, he was learning, looked different at 40. "I have to get to school," Clara said, but she did not move. "But I'll be done at 3, if you want. If you need help going through your mother's things, I could come by. You don't have to do that." "I know I want to." She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "Your mother was kind to me after you left. She never made me feel like I should stop caring about you. I'd like to help, if you'll let me." He nodded, could not quite trust his voice. She touched his arm briefly, a fleeting connection, and then she was walking away, following the path through the field toward the road. He watched until she disappeared, then turned back to the tree, put his hand on the bark again, felt the solidness of it, the permanence, and made a decision. When the agent arrived at 10, he told her he was not ready to list the house, that he needed more time. She was understanding, professional, told him to call when he was certain. And after she left, he walked through the rooms again, but this time he was not cataloguing damage or calculating value. He was remembering. His mother reading to him when he was small, Clara laughing in the kitchen, summer evenings on the porch, winter fires in the living room, the weight of history in every corner, every object, every inch of space. And he thought about what it would mean to keep it, to come back regularly, to maintain this connection to a life he had tried so hard to leave behind. At 3:15, Clara knocked on the door. She had changed out of her work clothes into jeans and an old sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Where do you want to start?" she asked, and he led her upstairs to his mother's room. They worked in comfortable silence, sorting through drawers and closets, setting aside clothes for donation, photographs for keeping. Clara was gentle with everything she touched, treating his mother's belongings with a care that made his chest tight. She held up a scarf, pale blue silk, and said, "She wore this to church every Sunday. I always thought it was beautiful." "Take it," he said, She would want you to have it. Clara folded it carefully, set it aside. They moved to the next drawer and the next. Hours passed. The light shifted, and gradually as they worked, they began to talk. Not about the past, not yet, about small things, her students, his work, the changes in town, the constancy of the field and the oak tree. It felt easy, natural, like falling back into a rhythm they had both been moving to separately all these years. When they took a break, sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes, Clara said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why did you really come back? I know you said it was to sell the house, but—" She trailed off, searching his face. "It feels like there's more." He was quiet for a long time, trying to find honest words. "I think I came back because I was tired of running, because I'm 40 years old, and I can't remember the last time I felt like I was where I belonged. Because my mother died, and I realized I had spent so many years away that I missed most of her life, and because—" He stopped, started again, "because I never stopped thinking about you, about what we had, about what I gave up." Her eyes were bright. "What are you saying?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know if I can stay. I don't know if it's fair to ask you to wait again. I don't know anything except that being here, with you, feels more real than anything I've felt in years." She reached for his hand, held it tightly. "I'm not 21 anymore. I'm not going to wait for you to figure out your life. If you go, I'll be sad, but I'll be okay. I've learned how to be okay." She paused. "But if you stay, even part-time, even just sometimes, I'd like to see where this goes. Not back to what we were, forward to what we could be." He looked at her, at the woman she had become, strong and certain and heartbreakingly familiar, and he felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty, not yet, but possibility, the fragile beginning of something that might, with time and care and courage, grow into the life he had always been too afraid to choose. They finished sorting his mother's things as the sun set, the room slowly filling with golden light. Clara helped him carry boxes downstairs, load them into his car for the donation center. They made sandwiches in the kitchen, ate them standing at the counter like they used to do years ago, talking about everything and nothing. And when it was time for her to leave, when she was putting on her coat and gathering her things, she turned to him and said, "I'm glad the house didn't let you leave. I'm glad the past held on." "Me too," he said, and meant it. After she left, he walked through the house one more time. But it felt different now. Less like a museum of a life that had ended, and more like a space between things, between what was and what might be, between the person he had been when he left and the person he was becoming now that he had returned. He stood in the living room, looking at his mother's chair, at the photographs on the mantel, at the windows that framed the field and the oak tree, and the sky turning purple with dusk. And he made another decision. He would keep the house. Not to live in full time, not yet, but to have, to return to fill slowly with new memories while honoring the old ones. He would come back more often, would spend weekends here, would learn to belong to this place again in a way he had not allowed himself to before, and he would see where things went with Clara, slowly, carefully, without promises he could not keep, but with intention, with presence, with the understanding that some things once lost deserve a second chance. The next morning he called the agent and told her the house was off the market. Then he called his office and asked about working remotely a few days a month. Then he walked to the field, to the oak tree, and stood looking at the initials carved into the bark. They were still there, still visible, still true. And he thought about all the years he had spent trying to outrun them, trying to become someone who did not need this place, did not need her, did not need anything but forward motion and achievement and the hollow comfort of distance. And he thought about how exhausting it had been, how lonely, how futile. Clara found him there an hour later. She did not ask what he was thinking. She simply stood beside him, her hand finding his, their fingers lacing together in a way that felt both new and ancient. "I told the school I needed a personal day," she said. "I thought maybe we could spend it together if you want." "I want," he said, and it felt like the first entirely true thing he had said in years. They walked back to the house together, made coffee, sat on the porch steps in the cool morning air watching the mist lift from the field. And they talked, really talked, about the years apart, about what they had learned, about what they regretted and what they did not, about the people they had become in each other's absence, about whether those people could find a way to fit together now, in this time, in this place that had always belonged to both of them, whether they were here or not. "I don't want to rush this," Clara said at one point. "I don't want to try to go back to being kids. We're not those people anymore." "No," he agreed, "but maybe that's better. Maybe we needed to grow up separately before we could be together properly." She leaned her head on his shoulder. He put his arm around her. And they sat like that as the morning stretched into afternoon, as the sun climbed higher, and the shadows shortened and the world moved on around them. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a dramatic reunion. It was simply two people, older and scarred and wiser, choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. Choosing to try when giving up would have been simpler. Choosing each other with full knowledge of the cost and the risk and the possibility that it might not work. But it might work. That was the thing. It might actually work. And that possibility, fragile as it was, felt like more than he had allowed himself to hope for in a very long time. Days became weeks. He stayed longer than he had planned. The house slowly came back to life around him. He fixed the porch, tended the garden, opened windows and let air and light flood in. Clara came by most evenings after work. Sometimes they cooked dinner together. Sometimes they just sat and talked. Sometimes they were quiet, comfortable in each other's presence in a way that felt like coming home. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, she said, "Do you think your mother would be happy about this?" He considered. "Yes, I think she would. She always liked you, and she always wanted me to be brave enough to stay. Are you brave enough?" He looked at her, at the way the dying light caught in her hair, at the quiet certainty in her face. "I'm trying to be." She kissed him then, soft and slow and full of promise. And when they pulled apart, she said, "That's all any of us can do." He went back to the city eventually. He had to. He had work, obligations, a life that could not be abandoned entirely. But he came back every other weekend, sometimes more. The house stopped feeling like a burden and started feeling like a refuge, a place where he could breathe, a place where he could remember who he was beneath all the layers of ambition and achievement and carefully constructed identity, a place where Clara was waiting with her steady presence and her honest eyes and her willingness to build something new from the ruins of what they had lost. It was not perfect. There were difficult conversations, moments of doubt, times when the distance felt too great and the past too heavy. But they worked through it. They learned each other again. And slowly, carefully, they built something that was theirs. Not a recreation of young love, but a mature understanding of what it meant to choose someone every day, with full awareness of their flaws and their wounds, and their complicated histories. Months passed. The seasons changed. Summer turned to fall, fall turned to winter. And on a cold December evening, as they sat by the fire in his mother's living room, Clara said, "I love you. I know we said we'd take this slow, but I need you to know. I love you. Not the boy you were, the man you are now." He pulled her close, felt her warmth against him, felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. "I love you too," he said. "I think I always have. I just had to learn how to be brave enough to stay." She smiled against his shoulder. "You're here now. That's what matters." And she was right. He was here, in this house that had refused to let him go, in this town that had waited patiently for him to remember where he belonged, with this woman who had loved him through his leaving and his returning and all the messy, complicated years in between. He was here, and for the first time in a very long time, he had no desire to be anywhere else. The house had not let him leave. The past had not permitted him to forget, and he was grateful. Grateful for the weight of memory, grateful for the pull of unfinished things, grateful for second chances and the courage to take them. Some places hold you for a reason. Some people stay with you even when they're gone. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get the chance to come back, to try again, to build a life from the pieces you left behind. He looked at Clara, at the fire reflecting in her eyes, at the quiet contentment on her face. And he thought about all the years he had wasted running, all the years he could have had if he had been brave enough to stay the first time, but dwelling on what could have been was pointless. The only thing that mattered was what he did now. How he chose to live in this moment. Who he chose to become. He chose this. Her. This house. This town. This life that was not glamorous or exciting but was real and solid and full of the kind of love that endures. The kind of love that grows quietly, steadily, without fanfare or drama. The kind of love that says, I see you, I choose you, I will stay. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Some stories do not end the way we expect them to. Some loves do not follow straight lines from beginning to end, but loop back on themselves, circling through years of separation and growth before finding their way home. This is one of those stories. Not about a perfect reunion, but about two people learning to be brave enough for a second chance. Not about erasing the past, but about building a future that honors it without being trapped by it. If you have ever left something behind and wondered if you made the right choice, this story is for you. If you have ever loved someone and let them go because you thought it was what you needed to do, this story is for you. If you have ever felt the pull of a place or a person you tried to forget but never quite could, this story is for you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about the places that would not let you leave, the loves that stayed with you even in absence, the moments when you were brave enough to go back. Your story matters. Your words matter here.